Chapter 13. The Storm That Learned Humility. At 16, the practice yard gave back the sound of grown feet. Wood rang truer. Bruises took longer to fade. Sparring ended more often with laughing curses than tears. The nest had been built to keep infants safe and elders comfortable. It now learned how to hold youth at the hinge between promise and trouble. There was a day when the nest learned, with a very intimate shiver, how close a good wall may come to failing and still hold. Afternoon heat lay on the stone like a relaxed cat napping in the sun. The air was the quiet sort that usually encourages industrious boredom. Then the weather discovered an opinion. Marius's temper did not break like a plate flung in spite. It unfolded, too much thrown at his control from too many angles. He had argued numbers with his mother. The ledgers had refused to submit to an elegance he believed they ought to possess. Raina had mocked him for courting decimals while ignoring the wind already licking the parapet. Riffe's training with Alaris made too much of a noise. Small grievances braided. The sky listened too closely. It began with a tight flick of white at the corner of the courtyard, a needle stroke from stone to lintel. Then another. Copper threads in the walls hummed and began to look thoughtful, which is the architectural equivalent of deciding which saint to petition first. The air thickened, unripe thunder, the taste of iron, the sharp, dry smell that usually belongs to far horizons, not one's own doorstep. A draught curled under the doors like a cat with claws unsheathed. "Count!" Katarin called from the arch, voice even. "I am counting," Marius answered, and the words came out carrying static on their backs. "Boots off," Annlena added sharply, but a mother's command may anger, not calm a boy at the door of manhood, and this time they did just that disservice. He tore the laces loose in anger and flung one boot at a wall. The wind answered his gesture like a recruit eager to please a cruel instructor. It coiled between roof edge and wall and began to chisel at the air itself, looking for something to lift. "Breathe," Katarin said, still calm, but there was something sharp under the calm now. "I said I have it!" Marius snapped, and the courtyard light flickered under racing swirling clouds gathering above. Someone sensible, Solara most likely, shut the inner doors without drama. The nest concentrated its mass. Copper veins in the walls brightened. Old mortar remembered the vows mixed into it. All of it a welcome help, all of it insufficient if the tantrum of weather driven by Marius's temper chose to escalate. Riff put down the staff she had been sparring with and turned to him. Embarrassment of still needing her made Marius only angrier and unwilling to accept her aid. He tried the oldest reflex of frightened power. "Command," he shouted as Rife came towards him. "I do not need you." Wind whipped around Marius wildly, and the weather light danced on his fingers. "Go away. I command you." He tried. The last sentence carried inheritance, title, blood, all the tidy shapes humans like to draw around authority when they forget what it is for. "No," she said as she went. The refusal was not loud, it was not embellished, it simply did not move. Rife strode forward with the same composure that had once made Lord Redder hand her a lance out of resignation and respect. She looked at him, at the storm which was more him than weather now, and at the copper thinking about its duty. Lightning, uncertain whether it preferred to be a braid or a whip, sketched 3 bright, mean stitches across open air. The third glanced off the parapet stone and spidered in pale filaments downward, tasting for weakness. A gust struck the courtyard centre hard enough to lift grit. The grit hovered, indecisive, a suspended constellation. Katarin looked at Riff, eyebrows drawn together. He had no choice but to rely on her. Adding more power to the already laden storm would be like pouring oil on a fire. All he could do was to hold his own temper and magic in check. Rife crossed the inner courtyard the way a woman crosses a kitchen she owns, feet set, shoulders square, attention precise and completely unafraid of heat. The storm surged toward her, reading her as an obstacle but found her untouchable. She walked straight to him and slapped him across his cheek. It was not rough. It was just enough to break the thin glass between temper and attention. The sound snapped flatter than thunder, more domestic than war, and the storm flinched as a boy would flinch before deciding whether pride or comprehension would take precedence. Before shame could trip temper again, she took him into both arms and anchored him. His chest pressed against the still, stubborn weight of her. "Get a grip," she told him straight into his ear, steady as a plumb line. "You are not dying today, and neither is this house. I am not your servant to command. Breathe." "Release?" he started. "Breathe," she repeated, and let the power of his storm sink into her. The gust attempting to form an eddy above them hit the fact of her presence and collapsed into a harmless draught that wandered off to examine the herb boxes for lack of better employment. The sky cleared because she did not obey. She did not obey him because she was obeying the promises she made to him when he had not yet been too proud to ask for them. He inhaled deeply. The lightning threads thinned to pale hair and then to nothing. The grit suspended over the paving accepted gravity's old bargain and lay down. Copper in the lintel cooled from bright coin to old penny. When the storm had been walked to the door, more by refusal than technique, and told to go play outside, the hard clamp of her arms softened into a gentle embrace. He made a small sound entirely without dignity, the noise a boy makes when a limit lifts, and something still frightened inside him takes the invitation to be honest. He cried. Not long. Enough. Like a boy finally permitted to feel the fear that had been riding his temper for hours. Riff did not hush him. She offered her softness with gentle stroking of his back, and a feeling she did not have a name for yet. The nest, which does not gossip, said nothing. Its stones took in the static the way bread takes heat, and kept the memory of the lesson without reporting to idle tongues. After that day, humility began quietly to put its furniture into the room of his character. On certain nights when the weather wandered home late and full of opinions, no spite, just restless, he came himself to her door, knuckles soft on wood, pride wrapped decently about his shoulders like a cloak worn properly in public. The first time, she opened without making a sermon of it. The second time, she had already folded the blanket back. "Else no one sleeps," she said, practical as ever, and made a nest where the storm could spend itself on her steadiness instead of on stone and copper. He saw her as peace, the way a tired man sees a cool floor and lies down grateful, wanting nothing more. She, who was no fool, discovered what to name her feelings afterward, as one finds a bright pebble in a pocket and realizes one has been carrying it far longer than one admits. Chapter 14. The Quiet Oath. Alaris called Rife to the parapet where he liked to measure the world by the length of his steps. The wind kept its manners. Below, Raina harried a gull with exuberant indiscipline, while Marius pretended not to help the bird with a sly breeze. "It is time you began to think of your oath," he said, not as a command but as a door set ajar. "A knight's words are a harness you put on yourself. Choose who or what you will serve, and choose with your whole heart, a person, a house, a place, an ideal. But choose." Riff looked past him to the shoulder of the mountain that had taught her every lesson she hadn't learned from people. She nodded, not in surrender but in agreement with a problem set correctly. Her heart, if asked, would already have answered, but she was not yet willing to ask. Marius finding his way to her bed had become a quiet habit now. He came without ceremony, without knocking, and lay in her arms until sleep took him. She did not question it, she did not encourage it. It was simply what happened between them now, the way some things in life settle into place without fuss. And if anyone asked, she could say that she was his shield, his knight. Adults who had not forgotten how young they themselves had once been noticed after a while and probed the situation carefully. Annlena found her son's bed cold and still made up properly early one morning, then saw him leaving Riffe's room as she went searching for him. She did not scold, only told him to follow her to the slit window that smelled of reed music and ink. "What is this, my heart?" she asked seriously, and did not look like she would accept a lie. "She is my peace, mother," he said, quiet as a man at confession that is no sin. "Do not take her away from me." Annlena's mouth softened into an expression women learn when holding two truths. "I won't," she said, "but someone else might. She is not yours to keep or claim without promises made and kept. Your powers, both the magic and the title, take things that are not truly freely given too easily. Do not use either of them to crowd her life." He understood. He promised. He kept the promise the way he had kept the first wind he ever cupped. Carefully, proud that he could, and terrified to find out that he could not. Alaris took Ref's measure without a parade, as he always had. "I know Marius sleeps in your bed on nights when storms refuse to quiet. Talk to me of this," he said in the armory where leather smells like patience. "I know what it is to think you are the only shield that will do." "I am," she answered simply. "It is my duty. I can help when others can't." Then, seeing the instruction forming behind his eyes, she went on, dry as a week-old left-out bread. "And please spare me your lecture about the dangers of a young man in a warm bed. You trained me. If he tries anything without proper ceremony, that will be a problem for him, not for me." She looked down at the buckle she was tightening and added, softer, sadder, "My mother taught me the other lessons. I am cautioned enough by my own existence." Alaris nodded, the sort of nod that sets a standard and refuses to move it for affection. "Then hear this and put it somewhere that will not fall out of your pocket. It sounds to me as if your oath has already taken you. Same as mine took me, long before anyone writes it on paper or speaks it into a room. You may take your time making it known to the world. They let the young be young without being foolish. Solara and Annlena traded rooms around under the sensible fiction of better light and less draught. Two doors that did not need to be next to each other acquired a small, honest passage between them, hidden in a wall already busy with secret stairs. Gossip, like water, was invited to find a different path downhill. Solara's locket warmed slightly that evening for no reason she could name, but the next day she hung it on her daughter. For protection against folly, if nothing else. Alaris had no worry left for Riff, but he did have a quiet word with Katerine, who in turn invited Marius to his study. Marius insisted he fully intended to keep the promises given to his mother, but Katerine quietly pointed out that if intentions without effort were enough, the nest would not need to exist, and none of the three of them would have ever been born. He provided a down-to-earth education on how a man should go about managing himself when youth put undue pressure on promises that had made Marius's ears beat red by the time it was over and they left the room to take tea in the courtyard. Alaris was there with Riff and a practice dummy and chose the moment to educate Riff in all the ways one could make a man regret his choice to be rude. Riffa noted the audience and the direction of the instruction with quiet amusement. She put into her practice all the enthusiasm she could, for she was not fully trusting her heart, and took it as an opportunity to set up a firm warning so that her resolve would not be tested. Katarin observed with quiet satisfaction how Marius flinched when Riffa's knee met the dummy precisely as instructed, with a cruel thud, and felt quietly grateful to Rife for teaching the young prince the sort of restraint that is often neglected in royal households. Life went on. Marius learned to take his boots off at the door of Riffa's patients and to put them on again before dawn. Riff learned that love can be an oath spoken only to yourself for a long time without it becoming less binding. Years braided themselves tighter. Rif grew into her odd, necessary grace, tempering magic without scolding it into silence while making armor a second home, her honor and her still unspoken oath, her compass in life. Marius found numbers to be to his taste and preferred them strongly to sparring or people. In his youthful mind, if ledgers were correctly balanced, fighting would become unnecessary. It would take a meeting with the world outside to teach him otherwise. And while the nights his own bed remained cold, reduced over time, they never completely ceased, even when the need for them had. Raina mastered flight and fire with a dragon's natural ease, learning to carry her own weight and that of a friend without thinking. She learned to read the sky as if it were a book written in wind and cloud, and to answer its questions with heat and wing, but her colour remained dull grey, for she had not yet found her purpose. Chapter 15. Where Four Kingdoms Meet. Spring came up the pass like a good rumour, late then everywhere at once. Snow slackened its grip on the switchbacks. Goats revised their opinions about ledges. The river remembered how to hurry. News came with it. The old king of the south had died, and duty, which never misses a chance to dress itself in black, called the household down country. Time had come for Katerin to become the king of the south. There was much to be done. Messengers ran. Tailors discovered that boys and girls had become young men and women, while no one was looking, and made new decisions about hems in a hurry. The palace in the capital sent its agendas. "A year," Katarin said grimly to Anlina, in a voice that had forgotten how to be young. "At least." The three at the hinge of the nest's arithmetic listened to the arrangements and discovered that all their joints itched at once. A year of politics. A year of dinners that set food precisely where appetite wasn't. A year of learning how to sit still on a chair while people lied and called it courtesy, or worse, politics. They were 19. Their bodies had spent years learning the geography of sky and storm and the benevolence of stone. The world, once long ago, had said out loud what it wanted from them. Where four kingdoms meet, the oracle had said, now was as good as any life ever admits. In the morning the entourage was to leave. Guards in their good cloaks trimmed for spring, pack ponies unpacked and repacked to please 3 different kinds of fussy. Someone went to wake the young and found 3 beds empty and 3 rooms with the careful wrongness of planned disorder. On each pillow a letter lay as if sleep had written it. The first lay in Raina's large, uncompromising hand. Mother, father, do not scold me until I am where I can hear it. We are going to the place the old woman named. The dragon in me will not learn patience at dinners. I will not eat soup politely for a year while fate goes somewhere else to be met by less ridiculous people. Do not worry for Marius. He is very annoying, but he is my brother to keep, and I am good at it. Do not worry for Rife. She is the ground under us. I will not burn strangers. I promise to try not to burn friends. We will come home when we have done the thing that is ours to do. Raina. Alaris read it aloud to Eliza, who listened with her mouth folded to hide the unhelpful joy in it. Your daughter, Lady Liana, still at the nest, having chosen to stay until the others depart, observed dryly over their shoulders. Writes exactly like you think, Elisa. Marius's letter came on paper spattered with a blot at the first line, and none thereafter. Mother, father, do not fetch me back. If you do, I will only leave again, and that will make everyone tired. The sky has been tugging on my sleeve since before I could count. If the king's crown wanted me in mourning for it this year, it would have been kinder when I was small. I will not be careless with girls or with kingdoms. I will write when we can find ink. Marius. Anlina looked at the letter with indignation, as if it was a piece of spoiled meat. Katerin's mouth did a tiny thing that a man might get away with once in a season and insisted it was not a smile. Rife's letter was the smallest, and Solara held it a long moment before she unfolded it as if it might run away if she rushed it. Mother, please do not be frightened. Tell Lord Redder I took the practice lance he hates. Tell Alaris I will keep my oath. Tell everyone not to make a fuss. The old man better have a good excuse for abandoning you when I find him, or regret will come in the form of a thorough beating earned with and delivered by his own flesh. I love you. Riff. Solara pressed the paper to her mouth, then her brow, and then laughed through the wet in her eyes. How they went was not, in the end, a mystery. Raina had made, for once, an exception to the rule that no saint could persuade her to carry Marius. Only until the river, where we have boarded our horses, she had warned with theatrical severity, and he had agreed with the perfect humility of a person who has been offered grace and knows better than to explain why he deserves it. They took little, the small packs that know how to hold exactly as much as a person of sense can carry. The coins 3 miserly years saved off their allowance, 3 good knives, a kitchen knife so worn thin that it curved, a pocket knife Riff had had since she was old enough to own one, and a lithe dagger Marius hid on his person at all times and mostly used as a ruler. And Riff's purloined lance. They left to touch the world without the burden of titles and expectation. The courtyard filled with voices as discovery spread like any honest contagion. Solara tidied nothing because some disorder deserves to be kept. Lady Lyanna read each letter twice and laughed, then consoled Solara. Those 3 are a menace to the world. There is little out there that could hurt them. Katerin shrugged his shoulders. Marius would need to come to claim his title whenever he was ready then. Annlena just remembered the wish they had made, for their children to have the freedom to choose, and reminded Elisa of it. Elisa smiled. Let them choose then, for a little while, she said. They will be fine, Katerin said, not to comfort anyone but because he believed it. They have been trained by better hands than any court has to offer. There is very little out there that could seriously harm them now. A little road blisters and a few meals that require a knife to argue with will do them good, Alaris added, entirely unrepentant, and therefore oddly reassuring. Elisa's low laugh at his side confirmed her agreement. Solara, Lady Lyanna said, the nest is yours. Send word the moment they return. Solara inclined her head with that graceful plainness the house had learned to obey. I will, she said simply, which everyone understood to mean more than any ornate oath they could have extracted. By noon the procession turned its face south, slimmer and less adorned with would-be titles than a capital would prefer. High Pass watched them go without panic and with considerable opinion. It was magnanimous enough to share its ruler with the kingdom, but proud enough to still call the future king theirs. Lady Lyanna and Lord Redder left soon after, turning north. At the last turn of the road, Lady Lyanna looked back. The terrace was empty, but the air above it wore the faint memory of 3 young shadows. She made herself a small, practical benediction and sent it after them. Bread when needed, friends met at the right inns, and enemies seen a heartbeat early. Lord Redder, who did not believe bleary benedictions worked any better for being longer, added silently, sense enough to come home if the gods decided to be funny with them. Somewhere out there on a journey to become the adults they were meant to be, a dragon who would need to be taught by another dragon how to be one waited to be met. A choice in a girl's steady hands that were now holding a worn lance was waiting to be made, and a prince, himself not even certain yet, if he would and could become a king someday, had a queen who had not even found herself to find. The children of the pass had left the nest,